Happy vote. My name is Bryce Bennett, and I am the project director for Vote Early Day, the person who has the honor of working with thousands of partners who are celebrating in every single state across the nation today to help your friends and neighbors find out their options to cast their ballots ahead of Election Day. And we are having a bit of a tradition at Vote Early Day at this point of doing an interview with our friends at Drag Out the Vote, a fantastic organization that connects entertainment with democracy and making sure that everybody has a chance to share their voice and nobody is left out of their important opportunities to vote. So I am very honored to get to share the screen today with the much more beautiful Plasma, who is joining us here for this conversation to talk about her involvement with Drag Out the Vote and why she's involved with this work. But before we jump into that, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much. Plasma. I am based here in New York City, great state of Texas, and I come from a family, and I come from a very mentality from growing up in the South, and with gave me a lot of information so I could make informed decisions in the political sphere. So I am so grateful here on Vote Early Day. I think
fantastic. And again, unfortunately, because I think that you're cutting out a little bit with some of your speech, but hopefully we'll be able to repair that as we move along here. But a great opportunity to start that off is to tell us just a little bit more about why you're excited to celebrate Vote Early Day today.
Yeah. So like I had a family. I have had a parent and grandparents, the governing bodies of the state of Texas and state levels. I grew up in a very political, always been something that we talk about in my family. And as a drag artist, I understand that what I do is charged. And so getting the opportunity to encourage people to vote Democratic. I don't want to say, because, well, you know, if you want to say and how you are sort of obliged, it's sort of your duty to your voice be heard. So I'm just happy to be involved in any, especially on Vote Early Day. I'm not a very proactive person, and do vote early. I encourage you to, the rest of the procrastinators like myself, to get out there later.
Absolutely. Well, and it's a great transition about, you know, how did you started with drag? How did you get doing drag for the first time?
So very little. For around Halloween time, the first Halloween I remember participating more than anything in the world to go as Dorothy Gale from The Voice, and my sister's best friend both wanted to be Dorothy. Very supportive parents. I have very and understanding family, and they dressed in the ruby slippers, and I paraded around my neighborhood. I guess you could say that was the first time I did drag. Just been obsessed with acting a fool and entertaining people, making people laugh. I have a background in musical theater. I have a bachelor of performance, and so I performing very seriously. It's what I was meant to do. Doing drag in New York City is just a further.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, I think that we're losing a little bit of the content. So if there is anything that we can do to help the folks who are able to hear all your great answers, take a second to say something to make sure that that's coming through a little more clearly.
Let me try some. Can you hear me at all now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, great. Is that better?
Yeah, I think that's better. Well, and I appreciate you taking the time because I do want all these great answers that you're sharing with us today. So, you talked about how you got started with drag, but I'm very curious how you take the talent and the excitement that you had for drag and turned it into advocacy with an organization, Drag Out the Vote.
Well, I um always had the opportunity to, how do I put, I've always in my life found the opportunity to broaden horizon, the local populations that I find myself in. I grew up in a Texas town, um, with lots of political alignment on either side of the aisle, and I have very, very supportive family who know that I am and a queer performer. And so growing up in, oh, did a solo now? Okay. I grew up in a very, very rural Northeast. So since my family's always been very governmentally involved and conscious, I have always had the knowledge. I've had the power of information at my disposal. And I've also had the power of a platform at my disposal is, and who my family is in relation to. And so growing up, I always saw my family participating and speaking out. And so I felt very, very compelled from an early age to use whatever platform or whatever platform I found at my disposal to, getting kind of flustered. I've always tried to use the platform that I find myself on top of as a means to share democracy and the power that the government has in terms of individual, very, very varied lives. And so I've always found speaking out and being loud and proud, as they say, especially in the LGBTQIA plus, a lot of advocacy work that I find very important and very impactful. And coming from who I hope is well spoken, I find that a lot of people, when it comes from a very colorful face, and I don't really know where Bryce went. I can't see Bryce on the screen anymore.
No, I'm still here. I was just giving you the full screen so that people can hear your answer as clearly as possible. But that's very fantastic. It's so exciting to hear from people that have been involved in politics and been involved with helping people learn about their options to cast their ballot from a very young age. And it sounds like you've been involved with a number of different elections over the years with your family. And so I'm sure you've been involved during presidential elections, during city council elections, midterm elections like the one that we're in this year. Obviously, there's a ton of spotlight when it comes to a presidential election. Everybody's watching it. But why do you think it's important that people turn out in a midterm election year like this one?
I truly believe that any starts at a local level, a very, very, very basic local level. My dad actually ran a few years ago, and I saw very, very clearly that things start local place. Everyone has their individual beliefs that are and that therefore informs a more regional level, which informs a state level, which informs. And so I truly believe that every election that I personally privileged enough to be a part of or to cast my ballot in is just as important as a president. Think about it. Every single person on a ballot is an individual. They make it a difference on an individual, a cog in the governmental machine. So the president is, they have a platform and they do make change on a grander scale, but it is still an individual. At the local level, for your city council person or your mayor or your, of your hometown, huge or teeny tiny. I now live in New York City, but I'm from a hometown. Every single person has an individual difference and an individual impact. And or if you see it at your local level, small things that you would love implemented or you believe could be different and benefit your local environment, those are just as important as they are just things that you will see closer to home. So I truly believe that every single reasons, not all of them are as flashy or as well funded or debated as the presidential election, but they are just as equally important in my brain anyway.
Absolutely. And we talk about that all the time. We just came from 2021, which was really a focus on mayors and city council members and people that are going to be your friends and neighbors that in your community. And on a large part, those are the folks who are going to affect your day-to-day life more than anything that's happened level. But in this year, in 2022, you kind of get a mix of that. You get both the local elections, which are going to be very, very important, some of that day-to-day, and we're electing members of Congress and senators and governors and people who are everywhere in between. So there's just so much on the ballot. And I think that you said exactly right, that there is really meaningful things for people to engage with at every level of the ballot. But when it comes to casting a ballot, we know that one of the most important things that people can do to ensure that they get that done is to have a plan to vote. And I'm curious, Plasma, what is your plan to vote this year?
I was a procrastinator, right? So I just registered to vote in the state of Texas because I moved very recently to New York City. I literally yesterday emailed in my my application for a ballot by mail, for an absentee ballot. And I emailed my local clerk for the election, or my local county elections clerk, I believe is what I wrote for my physical ballot request, which I also had to mail in. So I had to running around in a fluster. And of course, the USPS in New York City is just like chaos. It's insane. But I emailed my elections clerk in my Texas, and I sent in my PDF request for an absentee ballot. And then I also for an absentee ballot. Hopefully they arrive. The physical copy will arrive email with my PDF scan, and I'm sure it will. I trust the USPS in New York City, as is the truth with a lot of things here in New York City. But that is my plans in the state of Texas. My family was very involved at a gubernatorial level. I believe that the governor's race is very important and very impactful to me. And so I couldn't miss it, and I wanted to be a part of it. And I'm very, very soon New York State resident when I find my social security card and my of this life that I live as a drag queen. So that's my true unopened of how I'm voting this year.
That's fantastic. That's so good to hear. I mean, it's so wonderful because when people start thinking about their plan, they realize there might be some obstacles I have to overcome to make sure that I have a chance to cast my ballot. By thinking through those and making a plan to get around them, in your case, it sounds like ballot all the way from Texas is something that you had to think through a plan for. And now you've got one, you're in the works, and you're going to have a chance to share your voice this fall. So that is so encouraging to hear. But we know that voting is certainly one of the most important things that people can, our democracy and our civic life doesn't just end at voting. We ask people to engage beyond that, to help their friends and neighbors cast their ballots as well. And so I'm curious about what are you and other drag queens out there doing this fall to turn out the vote?
I'm doing this, and I'm working a lot with Drag Out the Vote. I think I am recently officially an ambassador, a drag ambassador for Drag Out the Vote, which is a nonprofit organization that helps of drag to popularize methods through participate in the democratic process. So I'm doing a lot of this. I and my friends who still live in my hometown on how I can best support them at a local level in New York City. And at a community level here in New York, there are LGBTQIA plus artists that are becoming so involved of and every single level of a representation for queer people and queer identifying souls. So really expect so much political involvement. You know, I moved from the South, and I sort of realized that particularly this election year is a very volatile state in terms of who they are running on. And then I moved to New York, and I sort of realized, or I sort of thought to myself, there's a stereotype about New York State voting a certain way. And I have come to realize that every democratic process is very, very similar, whether it's Texas or New York, out on every side, and that it is equally important to hear every single voice. And naturally, we have a bit of a stage presence, so we're speaking quite loudly to see how many queer artists have shown up to participate in organization fundraisers and tech to people in more rural areas, or we partner with other organizations across the country, provide resources for people at a more local level. And I learn drag artists who are becoming involved in political matters, even though queer people didn't have any sort of representation in governing bodies. And I think I read somewhere either today or yesterday that in every single state in the United States, an LGBTQIA person at this election. And I think that's incredibly exciting and very much a sign of the times. We're moving forward, progressive state of representation for queer people on the ballot, which is incredibly for nightlife performers in New York City and drag queens and drag kings and bar owners and people who feel like they haven't had a voice before are feeling themselves represented. So it's really cool to see people in this community rally around. It's really, really quite interesting and not something I ever expected I'd find here in New York City. Did their thing and yelled about bagels and coffee and donuts and pizza wraps and all that. No, people are very, very excited and very, very involved. It's wonderful. It's really cool.
That is so fantastic. Well, Plasma, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. And thank you for all the work that you're doing to help empower people with the information and tools they need to cast their ballot, especially the folks who are looking to do it early. We are so grateful to have Drag Out the Vote as one of our partners here at Vote Early Day. And I'm so grateful for the work that each and every one of you are doing in each of your communities to spread this information. So before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to share?
For participating in the democratic process, it means the world to me. It means the world to everyone else who is participating. Because, as I was constantly reminded as a child, if you don't participate, you can't complain about living in New York. It's that people love to complain. So, thank you so much for participating. Like me, if you want to get in touch with me, if you want any sort of resources from Drag Out the Vote, you can find me on social media at Plasma NYC. That's PLASMA NYC, and I copy for the rest of this stream.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much, Plasma. Thank you so much, Drag Out the Vote. And everyone continue spreading the word and doing everything to celebrate our 3rd annual Vote Early Day. Great night.